I've been asked to pull together a quick review of the state of the nation on effectiveness culture, which is obviously a huge topic, and I think you've probably heard an awful lot about it this morning, and some of the themes that I'll come up with, I think, are things that will be, kind of repeat things you've heard already. It's obviously a huge topic, though, so I can only really scratch the surface today. So I've got two components to what I'm going to say. So a bit of state of the nation, and then some practical examples of effectiveness culture in action. I think somebody was talking about this idea of going from the to-do list to the how-to-do list. So much of what we need to do, we have this fantastic body of learning, and now it's about getting it into practice, getting it into everyday behaviours, which is a different kind of task, I think. Firstly, then I just wanted to point to some of these really excellent reports that the IPA and ISBA have done, which are all available free online. And there's a wealth of good stuff in there about how you can build an effectiveness culture in your organisation, particularly marketing organisations versus agencies. And I think in terms of the state of the nation, it's definitely true there are genuine reasons to be cheerful today. It feels like we're beginning, at least in the UK, to get some consensus around some of the principles and laws of how brands grow, even if it is nearly 10 years since the book of that name's publication. Similarly, on conference stages like this, you can't usually move for people competing to outdo each other with just how data-driven they are. And I think genuinely that does seem to be becoming some kind of reality in many, if not all, organisations out there. I think there are also the early signs of a much needed coming together between brand and performance. I'm putting those in horrible kind of speech marks because they're terrible terms, really. But people are beginning to start working out how these kinds of slightly different disciplines can best work together and what they can learn from each other. And they're beginning to see the commercial results of that. It's also definitely true that formal effectiveness training has never been healthier or taken up by more people. Over 16,000 people now have passed an IPA qualification with at least a foundation module on effectiveness. The IPAF test is available in 87 countries, and thousands of people are going through that. And launching today, the IPA will be launching an accreditation qualification that can demonstrate, for agencies that can demonstrate a culture of effectiveness in their organisation. But it's not all good news. We've seen Les and Peter's work pointing to a prevailing culture of short-termism that they've recognised was seen in the IPA data bank, which of course is only the tip of the iceberg. What is going on underneath that tip, we don't know, but it probably isn't particularly healthy. And the obsession with data can sometimes give us a glut of it, with great analysis and a focus on the data that really matters, feeling like it's playing catch-up. I'm sure we all recognise the problem of having too many metrics, not enough time to review the available data, and not enough really insightful analysis of it. The IPA and the FT's Board Brand Rift report points to some areas of development around senior leadership's understanding of how brand building works, which I think is a really important area of focus. And I think many of us would recognise that many marketing cultures are still very sceptical of brand building marketing and see it as somehow old hat. Although it's quite pleasing when you see one of those stories in the marketing press when a fintech brand, for example, discovers the awesome power of TV. So there are reasons to be cheerful, and also areas of development, which I think is reflected in ISBA's research suggesting that marketers mark themselves fairly modestly. 50% give themselves a 6 out of 10 for the or below for their own effectiveness culture. The same report suggested some really basic stuff just isn't happening, though, with only 20% of agencies saying they get briefs from most clients most of the time, including clear evaluation criteria and KPIs. And perhaps just as worrying is this stat that I think you've already seen, which is 50% of boardrooms rating themselves being average to poor at their brand building knowledge and understanding. So there are clear capability and training issues that we all need to face into. It really is not much use when marketers stand on platforms like this talking about how data-driven they are, when the reality is that many aren't even putting KPIs on their briefs. And just to check this state of affairs myself, I asked the advertising and marketing people of Twitter, who of course are quite bolshy lot, a similar kind of question, and got back an extreme and quite twittery response. 50% claimed their agencies or clients' approach to effectiveness is deplorable. Now, this is not science, this is not a data point to be trusted, but it's slightly shocking in a way. And of course, I fixed it by making the words seem rather emotionally appealing and twittery, but that's the day-to-day reality for many people. So let's celebrate the fantastic work going on in those kind of best-of-class companies, but let's really bring up the floor, because there's some terrible stuff going on out there. Les, we've got work to do. So I think there may be some marketing press, kind of grandstanding, and maybe some bullshitting going on. I've definitely seen some famous marketing organisations who will remain nameless, whose big name leaders on the one hand will talk about just how data-driven they are, but on the other, you ask the frontline marketers for just a little bit of data and they won't be able to give it to you. So there is a big difference between what is said out there in marketing press and on stages and what's actually happening in the kind of day-to-day reality. For me, I think part of the solution comes down to creating everyday effectiveness cultures. Effectiveness all too often just means the big stuff, big names, big ideas, big moments, big awards. But that stuff means nothing if the rest of us are not translating it into small, everyday, habitual stuff. Effectiveness is a habit, a muscle. It needs exercising every day. And so I wanted to share with you a couple of really small, everyday things we did at a previous place to embed effectiveness culture there, just on a day-to-day level across the agency, not necessarily particularly heavy data stuff, nothing about tech or software, all very simple, practical, analog things that anybody can do. So the first was just a really simple report on the back of every creative brief with what you wanted the work to achieve, what you did, what you learned from it, what you'd do again, what you wouldn't do again. Very analog, very simple, very obvious, and it's sort of surprising to me that this isn't happening every day in all agencies everywhere, because it's super simple stuff. Forget some of the kind of marketing buzzwords if you're not doing this stuff. This is base level stuff. And it didn't aim just to capture effectiveness, but also ineffectiveness. In fact, wouldn't it be good if we had an ineffectiveness awards scheme? It'd be quite interesting, wouldn't it? Because real learning cultures are about learning from, probably more from the times it hasn't worked than the times when we pretend it has. We'd print those out, stick them on a wall in the agency for everyone to see. They're very useful for new business, very useful, simple, easy things to refer to. We also turned the effectiveness headlines, super simple headlines from our campaigns into really nice, simple, beautifully designed posters. Always using the campaign assets to make them look good and designed by a professional, proper designer, not just somebody that can do PowerPoint. And we put them up around the agency. We had a corridor full of them. We wanted to get them literally into the fabric of the building. And we wanted everybody to feel ownership of effectiveness, not just the strategists or data people, because it's not something that can live in a silo. It's not something that can live just on spreadsheets. It has to be shared and shared through more interesting kind of storytelling, I think, than just sharing a spreadsheet. Clients or teams who didn't have one of these wanted one, so they would get the same kind of, be celebrated in the same way, and they began to ask if they could get one too. So it had a sort of a knock-on effect, and I know that the last time I showed this at an event like this, the NHS marketing guys cottoned onto it, and they're doing this in their own organisation, for different kinds of audiences within the marketing organisation. So it has a kind of virality, not just how we often put up our work in our offices or in clients' offices. It's nice, you can actually put the data headlines on there too. And it's an expression of a thing that we talked about at my old place, which is make the numbers dance. So present the numbers in a creative way. So don't ever talk about effectiveness purely in sort of data terms. Try and bring creativity into them as much as possible. And that's a kind of mock-up of a corridor that we had back at the old place. So effectiveness isn't just a 4,000-word academic essay written every 2 years. It can be a tweet, a poster, a 5-bullet-point email. I know, and I've talked about the NHS thing. So these were equivalents for all our 9 IPA cases, similar kinds of things. And we'd also turn them into little social media videos. I'm going to pretend this is the world's first Instagram video for an effectiveness case study. And it was a Virgin Media, and I think it's silent, so forgive me. So a really simple example of how effectiveness is for everyone. Share stories, not spreadsheets, keep it simple, and make the numbers dance.